On today's Antiques Roadshow, we're in Erddig in North Wales, home to the York family for over 250 years. Now, we all like holding on to our family treasures, or just stuff, but most of us run out of space. So what happens when you've got a house as big as this? Well, it's tempting to hold on to pretty much everything, and that's exactly what the Yorks did. By the time the National Trust was given the house in 1973, they took on a collection of over 30,000 items. From tapestries to tableware, from candelabra to Christmas cards, Erddig is a treasure trove of antiques. I'll be having a good look at the York family collection a little bit later on. But first, let's see what all our visitors have brought along to impress our experts.
When you pull this out of your bag, my heart stopped.
What's an old sledge worth?
I can see that it's what we kind of tend to call well-gigged.
I think it may be the hair of Charlotte Bronte. Is it? Who knows?
Well, not being a woman, I can't tell you how practical it would be.
They're making me work for my money today, aren't they, I tell you?
Antiques Roadshow is that I sit at those tables looking at people's things all day long, hoping to see something that makes my pulse race. When you pull this out of your bag, my heart stopped. So tell me why you have it and why you brought it here.
Well, I've had it 50 plus years.
Wow, you don't look old enough.
Thank you very much. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's from. Where I got it from was my grandparents' home. My grandmother hated the looks of it.
Oh, really?
When my grandfather gave it to me, I took it home. My mother took one look at it. She knew where it had come from. It was her parents' home.
Yeah.
She said, get rid of it. And I had to hide it for the rest of the time I was at home, which was another 10 years.
Amazing.
And I had to hide it in my bedroom.
Where did you hide it in your bedroom?
In my sock drawer.
The snake head in the stock drawer?
That's it, yes.
I really did think it was real. It looks real, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's actually gunmetal.
Yeah.
And this is gold. It's got gold teeth and glass eyes and a gold ring. And I looked here, there's a French gold control mark, right. So we know it's 18 carat. I mean, to make this look like a snake's head in steel, just blows me away. Snake's head's to do with medicine. You have the caduceus, which is the doctor's symbol.
Yeah.
For someone with a condition where they needed to carry their pills with them wherever they went in the 19th century, which is when this was made.
Okay.
But it's the most extraordinary objet vertu, which is what this is called. And extraordinary things have extraordinary values.
I know
No
you're
idea.
not interested, but
No,
I am.
no.
Why, is this going to go to you?
Well, yes.
It is, yes.
It would look lovely with your tattoo hanging there on your chest there.
Well, that's what I'd like. And me and my boyfriend would like to pass it on to our
me?
future,
Oh, no.
to our future children.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it'll stay in the family.
That would be great. You will not see another one. Now I'm going to tell you what I think it would make in auction.
Okay.
And I think it would easily make £2,000 to £3,000.
Good God.
Oh, okay. I won't sell it, don't worry.
You're not?
I know.
Because unless Ronnie takes it, I'm taking it back on.
Now, maybe you have a different weather forecast to mine, but you're expecting snow.
Well, possibly. We'll see.
Well, you've certainly brought me a sledge, so why?
So about 15 years ago, we moved to North Wales and we moved into a house, and we found that it previously used to belong to the Irvine family.
Hang on a minute, that's a good name. Irvine. So we're talking Andrew Irvine of Mallory and Irvine Everest fame.
When we went into the porch, there was a set of skis and a top hat, and they told us that those had belonged to Sandy Irvine, which was very interesting, something we didn't expect. When we moved into the house later, we found this in one of the outbuildings.
Irvine and Mallory, two great names in mountaineering history, probably conquered Everest in June 1924. I say probably because we'll never know for certain.
That's right.
Unless we find Irvine's body.
Yeah.
And who were they? Well, George Mallory, well-known mountaineer. Irvine had never been on an expedition before to the Himalayas. He knew nothing about it. He wasn't even a particularly well-trained climber. He was the youngest member of the expedition, I think. So why him? And the answer is because I found something about him ages ago which said that he could be relied upon to do absolutely anything except conversation. And probably that's exactly what you want when you're going up Everest. Born 1902, he was an inventor. He was a great sportsman. And miraculously, when he was 22 or 21, he was picked for the Everest expedition. But of course, a year before Everest, he went on a Merton College expedition to Spitsbergen. Now, this was obviously something to train would-be mountaineers and explorers. They would have terrain, learning about polar expedition. So I'm quite happy to accept that provenance. You've got one of the two Irvine sledges from Spitsbergen.
I did wonder. That's very nice that you think that too. It does all seem to fit.
I think it seems to fit. I mean, somebody can come up and say, no, it's not true, I've got 3 of them. But in principle, this is a good provenance. So, what's an old sledge worth? I still think because of those connections, you're looking at £3,000 to £5,000.
Which is quite impressively good, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, this is the brightest, lightest, hottest possible day, but you brought me something really rather dark, something from the grave, haven't you?
Yes, indeed.
Tell me about it.
Right, this belonged to my father-in-law, who has recently died. We've been clearing out the house, and we've now started on the attic, and we found this intriguing box, locked, no key. So key after key after key, pots and pots of keys. Voila.
Amazing.
It's like, oh, is that it? Is that all that's inside? And then I noticed inside there was an inscription. So I got my sight's not very good, so I had to get
a lens, of course
a lens. And it's like, see, Bronte. It's like, well, so I was like, so there's a date as well. Yes. So I was like, let's Google it. You never know what it brings up. So there we go. Charlotte Bronte, the date she died.
No.
It's like, okay, oh my God, this is... I'm getting goosebumps now thinking of it, because it was like, okay,
massive.
Right. It's got a hinge on it, so what's this? It's like, okay. Inside, plaited hair.
Yes.
So it's like...
Yes.
I think it may be the hair of Charlotte Bronte. Is it? Who knows?
Well, I think there's very little reason to doubt it.
Okay.
It was a convention to make jewellery out of hair in the 19th century. There was a sort of terror of not being able to remember the face and the character of people who had died. And so this is part of a tradition of taking a true souvenir, an incorruptible fragment of the person that had died, and to wear it. Okay. And so it wasn't an uncommon thing to happen, and it opens like a little biscuit tin
there's like a pin and it just pops open.
And then, amazingly, we see this hair work within, very finely worked and plaited, and it echoes a bracelet that Charlotte had made of hair of her 2 sisters, which she wore with an amethyst clasp for devotion. And so, late 19th century, but also the focus of Charlotte Bronte herself.
Right.
So the inscription looks completely credible to me.
Really?
And the date of death. And so everything points to this being exactly what you thought it was.
Okay.
And it's not only pulse-making for you, but it's pulse-making for me. So here we have something, from my point of view, utterly and completely credible, hugely exciting, part of British literary culture, and enormously difficult to value. Intrinsically, it's sort of 9-carat gold alloy.
Okay.
And I doubt, frankly, that it would be worth more than £25. But I think as a relic of one of the greatest romantic novelists of the 19th century, the author of Jane Eyre, that we have to put a very different sum on it indeed. And the excitement is escalating for me and for you and for everybody else, because I think this tiny, tiny little thing is worth £20,000.
Oh, my gosh. You should have provided me with a seat. She can have that rabbit she's been going about. She's been asking for a rabbit. You can have your rabbit now.
Yes.
Wow.
Occasion. It's all sinking in.
Fancy that.
I know.
My husband has just done a 12-hour night shift, and this is why he's not here today. He's in bed right now. So I have got some pretty big news to tell him. Yeah, so...
So these 2 drawings are by what used to be the greatest living Welsh painter, Cyffin Williams, When did you get these in your family?
So my mum has always had an interest in Cuff and Williams, and on her wedding day, her godfather, who knew Cuff and Williams, gave them to her as a present.
Oh, that's so nice. And when was this?
It was in 1991.
Right. Well, they were probably done round about then. I mean, Cuffin could do them incredibly quickly, and I'm afraid he was a little bit cynical about it. You know, he'd just go, done. I mean, he really was fast. I actually saw him draw a few times, and he was like that. I love the fox in this one, just running here, and this sort of dog that appears to have been just thrown into the picture, and they're just sitting there just concentrating really, really hard, and these two are talking about, they're so animated. And then this one underneath. Similarly, you've got that same group, but this time they're rather more intent, less animated. You can almost feel the drizzle down their necks, can't you? No wonder he was the greatest living Welsh painter. Why Cuffin Williams?
Well, when Mum and Dad got engaged, they lived in Snowdonia for a while, and Mum got to know Cuffin Williams' work through living in Snowdonia and became really in love with it and adored it. And luckily she had a connection through her godfather, him knowing him, so that made it extra special for her.
Okay. And are you going to own them when your parents give them up?
Quite nice, but I feel like they need to be together. Yeah, as a pair. Yeah.
They're not a pair. No, you can split them up. They're worth money. I mean, they're worth between £2,000 and £3,000 each.
Each?
Yes, exactly. And which one do you prefer? Here we go.
I actually... Well, then I'll have to go for the jumping dog and the box.
That's marvellous. You're obviously very good sisters.
Do you remember I told you at the beginning of the programme that Erddig has a collection of 30,000 items? Well, they date back to the 1680s, and all life is there, from portraits by Gainsborough to one more modern group of objects I'm dying to see. Come and have a look. Here in the stable yard, away from the bustle of the Roadshow, Head of Collections Graham Clark has dug out some of Erddig's two-wheeled treasures. I know you've got a fantastic collection of bikes here at Erddig, and presumably the Yorks were very much into their bicycles.
Absolutely, they were cycle mad.
And some of these bikes were part of the family story, weren't they?
That's right. The parents of the last two squires met through their mutual love of cycling, and there's a lovely tale of an evening spent here reciting cycle-related poetry in the entrance hall.
And so tell me about these here, then. What about this one? This is an extraordinary-looking thing.
This is the best that money could get at the time, so we're talking about 1870. This is a velocipede. What you'll notice is it's got a lovely hinged turning mechanism in the middle. It's got a sprung seat and lovely wired spokes, the first model in the UK to have that, so it's much lighter.
So with the hinge mechanism, then, so when you turn the wheel, instead of just turning this, you turn the whole front half, then?
That's right, yes. It would have been quite clumsy.
Well, I mean, it'd fall off, I think. And then does this come after?
Yes, this penny farthing dates from the 1880s, and we know that it was still being used in the 1970s by Philip York III, who was the last squire. He was still taking it into town.
Precarious.
What you didn't want to do was take a header and go over the handlebars if you braked too quickly.
This looks more like the kind of bike I recognise, though.
It is. You could see this on the streets today. It looks like a bike you'd recognise, but in typical York fashion, the frame is made of bamboo.
Bonkers, isn't it? I always thought that this was the first bike, the penny farthing. I didn't realise that other types of models predated it. I've always rather fancied having a go on one of those.
I wouldn't take this one for a spin. It's liable to fall apart. But we do have one that you can take.
You get the best view from up here. Let's get back to our experts, see what they're doing.
One of the many wonderful things about the Antiques Roadshow, and I've been doing it for more than 30 years now, is you keep seeing things you've never seen before. Okay. Where did you get this from?
It belonged to my great-grandfather, who was born around 1841, and he qualified as a vet in 1862, and he started work with Liverpool Corporation in 1867, and he was the superintendent vet working with the Shire horses. And he was actually given this chair as a gift in kind by an American sea captain. I actually don't know what that reason was for being given that.
Yeah, well, that's not uncommon to hear that, and I've heard it many times on the roadshow. People have been doctors and vets, more especially vets. I think farmers say, well, I can't afford that, and give you an old piece of furniture. What do you know about it in terms of its age, date, origin?
I was led to believe growing up that it was called a Boston rocker, but I don't know beyond that. And I've established that obviously the stars here are significant in that there are only actually 13, so I think it dates it to around 1790.
OK, 1790. I'm going to have to disappoint you with that one.
OK.
Yes, of course, the 13 stars were that sort of date without looking to my O-level history book again. And the eagle, that makes sense. But the whole shape of this chair, this bergère type shape, typical of England and America of the mid-19th century. So it's categorically mid-19th century. And therefore, I think it fits in quite nicely with your family history of the 1860s. You mentioned the word Boston rocker. Well, it clearly rocks. Yeah. I don't think it was made in Boston, and it's not like a Boston rocker. They're much more simple, very spindle-back, rather shaker-like chairs. Yeah. Very, very simple, very plain lines. This is everything but. You've got this wonderful eagle leaning down to these padded arms, and these lions here they're from Renaissance period. They're copying something from the 16th century. Okay. And little details here. There's a little which is very typically in the American style. The English used it, but this to me means it's American. So I think these 13 stars are much more important, actually. I think this is a reference to the Civil War of America in the 1860 period, and this is a reference, I think, to the Confederacy. I'm sure it is. It has to be. And it will become a hot potato, and somebody just thinks, help, we can't keep this anymore. We've lost the Civil War. Get rid of it. Who knows? But my gosh, it's going to be interesting to try and find out. As a Victorian chair, a rocker, 2,000, 3,000, a bit rough, broken bits, things like that. As American, £5,000.
Wow.
And if it is a Confederate piece owned by an important person, the sky's the limit. I don't know where to start or stop. 10 times more? We just don't know. It is a wonderful find, a most extraordinary piece of history. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A frog or a toad?
You tell me. I call it a frog.
OK, now you tell me what the function is.
Well, that's difficult because my daughter saw one in the Far East and she was told it is a chamber pot for women.
So a chamber pot for women?
It doesn't seem very practical, really, does it?
Well, not being a woman, I can't... let's get back to that. What I'm going back to is, what is it? Is it a frog or is it a toad? Well, toads traditionally are knobbly, and frogs traditionally are smooth. Yeah, and this is very knobbly.
So it's a toad?
I think so. Now, toads, frogs, are very, very good luck in China. They are associated with wealth. And he's perched on a plinth, a rather grand plinth, with lots of sort of trellis work, little landscapes, watery landscapes, as befits a frog or a toad. He's a rather fine specimen. He looks as though he's ready to jump into a pond to avoid the brilliant sunshine that we catch him in. The colour scheme is derived from the Kangxi period, the late 17th century, but which became very popular again in the late 19th century. And I think the one you've got here is actually a 19th century example of famille verte enamelled biscuit, it's called. I must say, you did slightly startle me when you said it possibly might have been for a lady's chamber pot. I can see how that would work.
Could you? I couldn't.
Well... in here and out there,
Yes, my wife was offering to demonstrate. But...
Oh, really? She's got the wrong show. Sorry. So I think this is a flower pot.
Yes.
Which I've seen with big apertures in the backs and usually an open mouth are for growing flowers. But, an object doesn't necessarily end up having the same function as was intended when it was made. Is it going to bring you riches as toads do? Well, it's got a number of hairline fractures, possibly from people trying to sit on it. Who knows? I would put a value... It's a very lovely thing. I don't mind too much about the hairline fractures. Let's put £1,000 to £1,500 on it. Yeah. So whatever tickles your fancy.
Well, an elaborate Welsh loving spoon in a very elaborate Welsh setting. Where did you get this amazing spoon?
Well, this was given to me by my grandfather. He lives in Ruthin in North Wales,
Right.
and he gave it to me, when he passed away.
So do you know all about the tradition of Welsh love spoon carving?
I do. I've read up about them a little bit. It was a gesture, token of love.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the better the carving was to show the capability of the man to the woman.
Going to marry the woman.
To try and impress the father.
Yeah, well, look, you've done your homework. That you could actually use, and we know that it goes back centuries. But the carving of very special spoons with all sorts of symbolism goes back really to the 17th century.
Right, wow.
Now, this one's made of pear wood, carved from a solid block.
Okay.
We have the endless knot, endless love, perhaps.
Right, okay.
We have at the front here a series of cages, and you'll know this, it's got little balls that actually rattle up and down inside, and that's suggestive of how many children the carver was hoping for.
So were they carved inside the spoon?
Yes, it's a remarkable piece. The whole thing was carved from one block of pear wood, including the chain, dating probably to the sort of mid-19th century.
Right, okay.
Perhaps 1830, 1850, that sort of age. And it's one of the most elaborate Welsh love spoons I have ever seen in my roadshow career. And if we turn it over, we can see that on the back, wheels representative of hard work and continuity. And these are very interesting. These are sort of nostril-shaped devices, symbolic of the human soul.
Is that what it means?
Two souls, interesting carved design and all the symbolism, and the sheer size and dexterity of the piece. Auction value, £2,500 to £3,500.
Wow. I am surprised.
To put them together yourself by someone with a degree, it's not worth a great deal. On a bad day, it's worth £50. On a good day, £80 of my sweat today, I'll tell you.
You brought in something that I want to call the vase of all vases. Tell me, how did you get it?
It's a family heirloom. Belonged to a great uncle, and now I have it, obviously.
It's a really fabulous piece, and there's so much going on. These panels here are decorated in what we call the Satsuma, Japanese style. On top, we've got these wonderful dragon handles that have been applied, and again, that's in the very oriental style. The body is pierced throughout with this beautiful honeycomb detail. So if we flip it over, here is the mark, and this is a mark of Emil Fischer, and he operated from 1866 in Budapest. So this vase is from the Art Nouveau period, 1895, 1905, something like that. It's quite rare, actually. We don't see many of these at all. Right. We put a value of £600 to £800 at auction for this.
Right, yeah. Wow.
Doesn't sound bad for a 1960s guitar, does it? A little bit of a hum on the amp, but I think we'll have to deal with that. I wonder...
It was a long, long time ago by my late husband, Roger Eaton, who played at the Cavern Club in Liverpool.
Oh, right, OK. So that immediately conjures up all sorts of ideas. And, of course, the first thing we're going to talk about is the Beatles, isn't it?
Yeah.
But he didn't play with the Beatles.
Not with them, but he was around when they were around.
Right, OK. So he was part of that kind of real 60s Mersey beat. And what was the name of the band?
The Detonators.
I've heard of the Detonators. That's him actually in the Cavern.
60s, in the Cavern. There he is there.
Yeah. Lovely.
And that's when it's called the Detonators.
That's one of their promotional photographs. That's lovely. I really like that.
Okay.
It's great to find a guitar that's got a little bit of background like that as well. I mean, this guitar has seen a pretty hard life.
Yes.
I can see that it's what we kind of tend to call well-gigged, which is a euphemism for kind of it's taken a bit of a battering, really.
Yep.
We can see that this is an Epiphone guitar.
Yep.
But actually, Epiphone was in fact a brand name for Gibson. Absolutely.
Yep.
So this is a model that's called a Newport. There are various models of the Newport, and some are much rarer than others. And quite honestly, this doesn't really conform to any of the models that I know because it's been much altered. It's got pots, potentiometers and things, and it's got this pickup here, which is not standard. So, what are your feelings? I thought you felt it looked a bit emotional when I played it.
I lost my husband in March.
Right.
And he hasn't played this for a long time.
Right.
Another one he plays with, but this was in the garage,
right.
The back of the garage, and I gave it to somebody because I thought there was something wrong with it. He brought it back that night and said, I can't keep this. This is quite valuable or quite interesting.
Right, okay.
Very honest of him.
Yes.
He said there's only 89 made in the world.
I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt because it's probably unique the way that it actually stands. With that Mersey beat back history on it, a Cavern Club played bass guitar like this I think is currently worth about £1,000 to £1,500 to a collector at auction.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure and an honour to actually play this one, so thank you.
It's time for our weekly challenge, and this week we have to spot the imposter, or the fake, if you like. Now, Eric, you brought along 3 pieces of what look like Delftware.
Correct. Yep.
And one of these is not as it seems.
Correct. Because one of them, as you quite...
And was made how recently?
Very recently.
OK. Give us some clues.
OK, let's start off with this item. Now, it looks like a chair of sorts, but it's not. It's actually an ice sleigh. Bearing in mind that the canals were frozen over and people were pushed along by people on ice skates on an object like this, obviously of life size. Date-wise, around about 1730, OK?
OK.
1680. 1680 to maybe 1700 is a prestige piece. It's a design which is derived from a Chinese example that would normally date to about 1580, 1600, time of Elizabeth I. The sort of thing that a Dutch housewife would give pride of place next to the family silver, etc. Moving back to the 18th century, we've got a plaque. It's an integral plaque insofar as the frame is all decorated, again in blue and white. It's actually looking at a Dutch idea of what the Chinese landscape was all about. So this one around about 1740 or thereabouts. So there's been the gospel truth.
And which one isn't? Which one isn't? Which one do you think is the imposter then?
The first one.
The little sleigh.
Yes.
And why do you think that?
It just looks cheap.
Looks cheap. Well, I hope you don't need to regret those words. I mean, it's got cracks in it. What do you think?
The middle one.
The middle one? Oh, I don't know. What about you?
Left.
You think the one on the left? And why do you think that?
It's just too, worn perfectly.
It's too perfectly worn. I did wonder about that. My eye is drawn, though, to this one. Who thinks it could be this one? You do.
Oh, look at that.
And why do you think so?
Because it's the largest, and usually the smaller things are the most expensive.
Don't bother.
It's make your mind up time.
OK. This has got cracks in it, which makes me think it's genuine. This is suspiciously worn, I agree. But I'm going for this being the imposter because it's in such splendid condition on the front.
Are you sure?
No.
You can change your mind. There's still time. No? No? They're with you. Fiona, I'd like to say that you're right.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. So tell me about values then.
Right, OK. This one is rare. It's exceptionally rare. And you're right, it has got a little bit of restoration on it. But that is £1,000 of somebody's money, without any question. This one, well, it is what it is. And these usually are sold in pairs. But by itself, it's worth in the region of £800. And if you try to make one of those and sell it at an auction, it's probably worth 6 months inside.
And if it had been genuine?
Had it been genuine, it wouldn't have looked like that. I'll tell you why, because the colours that have been used on there are 20th century colours. A lot of those colours were not available way back in the 17th century. In fact, they couldn't even do orange, which was very difficult when the man who was ruling here is the Prince of Orange. So he had to become the Prince of Yellow, because that's the only pigment they could actually use. But that is a bit of a concoction, even a confection.
Got you this time, Mary.
You did get me, kid.
Oh, God, that's marvellous.
Now, on a hot day like today, when we've got incredible natural outdoor light, it's actually a real treat to see an artist who was the absolute master of indoor artificial light.
Yes.
It's signed in the bottom left corner, BD, and that's Bernard Dunstan.
Yes.
And I love how luminous this looks, how the lamplight feels like it's sort of emanating out of the picture. How did you discover it?
We actually found it in a gallery in Anglesey, and my wife found it hidden paintings, and she pulled it out, and she really liked it so much that she said, you know, can we buy that one? It's at home with us now.
Lucky you. And did you know when you found it amongst a sort of pile of pictures, did you know who BD was?
No, didn't have a clue, never heard of him before in our lives.
What I think is really interesting to see about your discovered picture is that usually Dunstan is known for painting on a really small scale,
yes,
only about this big. So it is quite unusual to see such a large composition that's
yes,
almost 10 times what he usually did, that he could paint on different scales.
Yes.
What is it that you like about it?
Obviously the light in the room, I think that's lovely. I like the way the door sort of frames the painting, and I love the wallpaper. I think that's quite well done.
I think the wallpaper's amazing. I mean, I want to get into that room and see that kind of rich green and rose colours.
Very much so,
And
yes.
for me as well, when you get up close to it, you can see how he's layered the paint. He's
yes,
worked pretty quickly.
Yes.
It's very impressionistic. So I think for many different reasons, because it's unusually large,
yes,
because he was one of the most beloved Royal Academicians. I think if this was to come to auction today, we probably would see an estimate in the region of about £4,000 to £6,000.
Right. That's lovely, thank you.
There's quite some discovery in the stack.
Yes, yeah, no, it is nice. And as I say, it's down to my wife, she found it, so...
Well, you need to follow her taste and find some more things.
That's right, yeah.
Well, when I saw your vase earlier in the queue, I was quite excited by it. Tell me, what do you know about it?
It actually came from my grandmother's house. As a child, I remember it vividly. And sadly, when she passed, we were all allowed to choose an item from her house as a memento. And I chose what I call the earring vase. I understand that my grandmother's great-grandfather was in the Merchant Navy and did quite a lot of travelling in the Orient and the Far East, but that's pretty much all I know.
Okay. Well, it is Chinese. It is the kind of thing he would have got in Asia, probably in the early 20th century. If we look at it quite closely, you have all these different characters. There are probably Taoist immortals, and it's all about the harmony with the word. Now, how old is it? Well, if I just look underneath, you'll see there is a mark there,
yes,
6-character mark, and that reads Dai Qing Qianlong Nanzhe, and this says that it's from the Qing dynasty, and it refers to the Emperor Qianlong, which was between 1736 and 1795. This is actually late. Mark was probably added at the end of the Qing dynasty, so late 19th century. It's really lovely. The subject is what Chinese collectors want to have at the moment, and so I think it would do quite well at auction. And £1,800?
Wow. Wow. Incredible.
I'm not going to be coy about it. I think this bowl's absolutely gorgeous. Perhaps you could tell me a bit more about how it's ended up here today on our table.
It was given to my daughter as a christening present from my father-in-law.
Okay.
And unfortunately, Claire's no longer with us.
Ah, that's tragic. But gosh, that actually makes me think that the decoration on here is even more important, because it's decorated with poppies, which are the flower of memorial. Of course.
She would have loved that.
Would she? Was she a fan of poppies?
She loved poppies and sunflowers.
Right. They're beautiful. They're so exquisitely done. The closer you get to them, the more gorgeous they are. It's actually signed here, Gilbert Marks, 1899. Gilbert Marks called himself an artist in metal, which, you know, is quite a pretentious way of talking about your own skill. But he was. Nobody else was able to produce the sort of fluidity and lifelike chasing that he could produce. Below which we've got the an inscription for the 19th of March.
The date of her birth.
It's a lovely treasure to keep, I think,
Yes,
for you, and it's no surprise that he's so sought after. I think his work is absolutely wonderful. This is a small example, but absolutely perfectly formed. A bowl that size and shape made by a silver manufacturer would struggle to make more than about a couple of £100 by a good artist. A Gilbert Marks bowl, being as sought after as they are and in such short supply, is worth more like £2,500 to £3,000.
Oh, gee whiz. Yes. I didn't think it was going to be that high.
It's quite a special bowl.
Yes, I don't know what I'm going to do with this at the end. I've got 2 granddaughters.
Well, I'm sure one of them would love it.
What an amazing coat. We show it from the back first so you can see it in all its glory. So this is leather printed with all this foliage, and what I particularly love is the bees. Let's turn it around so we can see the front. Now, how did you come to have the coat?
Well, I was given it by a friend about 10 years ago. She told me at that time how she'd seen it when she worked in London. I think it must have been around the 60s, and she saw it in a shop window that she passed every day on the way to work, and she loved it, but it was very expensive, and eventually she decided to buy it.
It's by the designer Bill Gibb, who was enormously successful in the 1960s and 1970s. He created for all sorts of very famous actresses and models at the time. Twiggy actually wore one of his dresses to the premiere of her film The Boyfriend. Now, I think this dates from the 70s, so this is probably early to mid-1970s. It's sort of slightly Russian in influence, but he was, I think he loved nature. He was very inspired by nature. As a result, we've got these lovely leather embossed bees which replicate on the front. But it's in really nice condition, and what a lovely present for it to have given you. Have you ever worn it?
No, tried it on once.
It's the sort of thing that, quite frankly, really ought to be in a fashion museum.
Well, my friend offered it, I think, to the V&A at one point, because she has no children. But they said they had one like it, which wasn't in such good condition.
Oh, really? But I think it's the sort of thing that would be extremely desirable if it would come up for sale now. And there are various auctioneers all over the country that hold fashion sales who would love to have it, I'm sure. And I think that it would probably sell for somewhere in the region of £800 to £1,200.
Right.
Thank you so much for bringing it.
Oh, thank you.
Pleasure.
As a boy, I was obsessed with cars, and to a certain extent, I still am. And I would write to famous car makers and ask for their brochures. I would go into the local Rolls-Royce dealership, and I would walk away with brochures. You've got quite a few here.
Indeed,
How have you got these?
At a car showroom in Newcastle under Lyme, Staffordshire. And there was just a collection of brochures that I think happened sort of through the early 30s, just put in a box, left in the house, and then when my uncle died, 10 years ago, we cleared out the house. The box came with us, and the brochures have stayed in the box.
Very glad you kept them, because in some instances, this is just the sort of thing that would go on a skip.
Right.
As you say, early 30s, we've been through the books. They go from 31 to 34, I think. But what fascinates me is that it's an absolute who's who of the best British marques. I mean, there's Riley, Aston Martin, Railton, Lee Francis, Alvis, Morris, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, it's all here.
Yeah.
How many do you think you have in total?
I think there's somewhere between 40 and 50.
40 and 50?
Yes.
What's interesting is that the market for classic cars in this country, and worldwide in fact, has soared, and the people that can afford to buy these cars, these 1930s vehicles, want to have all the original paperwork, they want to have the brochures, they want the blurb, it all goes with it. If you imagine that each of these would fetch at auction, each one, let's say an average of 40 to 60, and you've got 40 or 50 of them there, Now, I make that £2,000 or £3,000.
Chips are on me tonight. Total surprise. Thank you.
Good.
I think we will take Christian's advice in terms of trying to store them better so that they are preserved, yeah. But there's no plans to move them. There's the deer.
Okay, that's the chips now.
A very unusual Christmas card has been brought along by one of our visitors that has got us all rather excited, because none of our experts have seen one like this before. It's a suffragette-themed Christmas card, and it says, "To vote, you have a right, and may they all get 'em." Or, "To vote, you have a right, royal time this Christmas." And these two little figures here are to go in the Christmas pudding. And it says, "Though you may fret and suffer as yet," like suffragette, "your rights someday perhaps you'll get. So do not be downhearted, ducky, but live in hopes. Buck up, be plucky. Who knows, someday you may be lucky." And of course, in 1918, they were.
Presented to my mother from her son, John Jones. Lucky mother. Who was John Jones?
John Jones was my grandfather. John Jack Jones.
And when was it? Right. And what has this got to do with Jack Jones, John Jack Jones?
Well, my mother always told me that when he was 13, he ran away to sea from Abereron, which is in Cardiganshire, and he travelled on many ships, and these are the animals and the ships that he saw on his travels.
Now, have we got any sort of documentary proof for that?
We do. We've got the first one there.
So, here we have John Jones, aged about 13 years. Amazing little tiny lad in 1875. Went on his first ship, the Jungfrau, as a boy. He was there from 1875 until 1876. Conduct and ability reported. Obviously, he did okay.
Yeah.
And then the next, this is his next ship, 1878, and it's a ship called the Hazelwood, and that's important. Can I give that back to you? Because this is the Hazelwood. It says J. Jones, maker, Hazelwood, and the date, 1879.
That's right.
We can pinpoint him exactly to carving the decoration on this cow horn, which of course is a powder horn, but by 1870 well away from muskets, so this was just a decorative object.
So would this have been a cow that was on the ship to feed them? Do you think?
It jolly well could have been. Do you know, I hadn't thought of where the cow may have originated, but it may have been something that he found at their destination, because the Hazelwood went to Australia.
Yes.
And it went to docked at Rockhampton in central Queensland. And while he was there, he obviously saw the local fauna. Here we've got an emu, a kangaroo. Who's Thomas Jones?
I think that would have been his father.
Great. It says safe return. It says when this you see, remember me. I mean, it's full of wonderful sentiment. But the thing that makes it particularly hot is this link to Australia.
Right.
And the Australian market is booming. So the value I would put on it would be between about 2,000 and 3,000.
When I started in the business, I used to go to a lot of antiques fairs, and I guess sort of back then, 20 years ago, and I came back with this, my mum would have said to me, "What on earth have you bought that for? What on earth did you buy this for?"
Well, it was sitting in the shop, in a furniture shop window, and I used to walk. One day I plucked up the courage and thought, I want to buy this. So I went in there and I said, "Can I buy this cat?" "No," he said, because it was in the window, it used to attract people to what was in his shop behind it.
It's eye-catching,
yes.
certainly.
So It took me a long, long time, but eventually I talked him into it and I bought it.
So this must have been sometime in the 1960s or 70s when you bought it?
1975 I bought it.
1975, the year I was born. Amazing. And this was deemed ghastly during the 80s and the 90s, but now they've come back massively into fashion. Popular with younger people who just want something quirky, something slightly more unusual. Something just to bring a sort of a smile to your face. Produced in Italy during the 1950s and 60s, and it was affordable fun. These were never expensive, high-quality pieces. And the same is kind of true today. They bring a smile to your face, they make you feel good, they attract attention, and I'm going to say she's worth about £100.
Oh, bless. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. They are, Claire. Yeah, sorry, that's my daughter. She's also been brought up with this cat.
So tell me, would you buy that for £100?
When she said she wanted to bring that today, I was shocked. Why that bit of tact?
This is the Antiques Roadshow, after all.
I'm never going to sell her. She is gorgeous and I will keep her forever.
Do you know, the first thing I ever collected as a boy was old bottles.
Wow.
And do you know why?
No.
They were free.
Okay.
I could get on my bike, I could borrow my dad's spade, and I could cycle down some canal bank and find a Victorian bottle dump. And in the cinders, I could spend all day digging up bottles. Nearly all of those bottles were machine-made 19th century bottles. And I was never, ever likely to dig up anything as glorious as this beautiful 18th century wine bottle. Now, this is the kind of bottle that I aspired to, and this is the kind of bottle that I only saw pictures of in books, basically.
Okay.
So, how come you have this beautiful, beautiful seal bottle?
This was a 21st birthday present given to me by a good family friend.
Were you interested in old things?
Yes, I was, because at the age of 17, my first job was actually in an antique shop.
Right,
and I've always loved old things.
Right.
So I collected a few things, but this was the most fabulous present. I was just thrilled to bits with it,
Absolutely.
and I've treasured it ever since.
One of the great things about this kind of bottle is that it has so much information encapsulated in this little seal on the front.
Yeah.
It's dated 1783.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that it has a name. Shirley was the name of a Scottish artist called Charles Sheriff.
Wonderful.
Not only that, and he was born in 1750, he was a really interesting bottle. And you know, I have no hesitation in putting £5,000 to £8,000 on this bottle.
Golly gosh. That's extraordinary. Amazing. Just to think, you know, it's just been stashed in a cupboard for a long time. I'm so thrilled.
Thrill for me too, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, you've got a novelty teapot like a tortoise that's clearly been dropped at some time.
That's right.
And an odd brown pot with 2 spouts and 2 handles. So you've got a taste for quirky things.
Well, my boyfriend has. He's the one who finds these. And I'm not that keen, to be honest.
So what?
I can see that was nice once, but obviously it's been broken.
Well, it was a wonderful teapot and made by Minton in Majolica about 1880. And one of the most famous Victorian teapots. But someone used this and it dropped out of their hands. It's all been in bits, hasn't it?
It has.
Oh dear.
Yes.
Stitched together by old metal rivets. I like to see those. Oh. But I think one can see the qualities in a piece like this. In this one, what's that one all about?
I really don't know. All I've been told is it's a posset pot. And I don't even know what a posset pot is.
Posset was a medicinal drink.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, it was milk and cream with honey to make it sweet, but they put all sorts of odd things in it. I think burnt toast was often went into it, and the sludge settled on the top. So you had to drink it from the bottom. And that's why you've got these long spouts. So what you would do to use it, you would hold it in the handles and then suck through the spout, and the liquid would come up, and you would be able to drink it that way. The nice thing about this is its age. I mean, this goes back to 1640, 1650 or something like that. And with their lids surviving, that's quite a rarity. I mean, Where's it from? Is it, I suppose, South England? Is there something? Does he buy these things locally? Do you know where he picks them up?
He does a lot of internet auctions and things.
Does he tell you what he pays for them?
No, I don't think he dare. No.
So you just have to guess as much as anyone. Well, I mean, these in many ways are very, very different. I mean, the teapot would have been hugely valuable if no one got it. But what he's got is a lovely opportunity to have a classic piece affordably, because I mean, unbroken, it's a £4,000 or £5,000 teapot.
Wow, yeah.
But even probably worth a 10 for that, 400 or 500.
Right, yeah.
But it's lovely fun anyway.
Yes.
And this rare piece of early English pottery, because of its sheer age, what should we say, £6,000 or £8,000?
Wow. Goodness. I think I might get to like it a bit more now.
What you've got here is one of the hardest materials known to man.
Jade.
Jade. The word jade covers an awful lot of different stones of different colours. And this particular colour combination, white with black and grey flecks, is a colour that the Chinese were quite keen on a long time ago. So what can you...
Belonged to my grandfather, who was a group captain in the RAF, and he was stationed in Singapore, I think, around the 1930s. And he and my grandmother did travel widely into China.
Ah, okay.
And this is one of the pieces that they brought back.
Well, let's have a close look at it, because this little animal, a mythical animal, I might say, I mean, he's got the central horn, I don't know, apart from a unicorn, I can't think what else it could be, but it's very lion-like. The lines that denote his eyebrows are perfectly parallel. To carve this material, which is one of the hardest materials known to man, would take a very, very long time. Using the tools available in the 17th century, that means it was made for somebody very special. I can only think of one person or his level, and that would be the emperor.
The story that I've always known that has come with him is that he originated in the Summer Palace. That's all I
Well, do you know, I think that is such a highly possible scenario. And we should just say that the Summer Palace is not like Hampton Court or Versailles. It's an enormous area, 4 times the size of Richmond Park, with many, many, many palaces and buildings in it. So when it was sacked in 1806, managed to ransack the whole lot. It's beloved of you.
Absolutely.
And you wouldn't be the only one. If this came on the market, it would fetch between £5,000 and £10,000. Easily.
Well, he's beautiful. He's not going anywhere.
Yes. Look at that grin. £10,000 because I'm worth it.
He is worth it.
We've so enjoyed our day here at Erddig. I hope you have too. I was tempted to cycle home on the penny farthing, but I think it might be a bit far from Wales to London. From the Antiques Roadshow, until next time, bye-bye.